Nikola Tesla may be renowned for his impactful inventions, but many are unaware of his early life. For instance, he developed a severe gambling addiction and hid himself away from all of his friends and family, which led to the common belief he drowned in the neighboring River Mur in his early 20s. Of course, this never actually happened as he grew up to innovate modern technology as a whole. His actual death, on the other hand, had more ominous undertones. He left his hotel to go on his routine commute and was hit by an upcoming taxicab which shattered numerous bones. He refused to tell a doctor, which resulted in his death in his hotel room. Shortly thereafter, the FBI seized Tesla's belongings, including a box he labeled his death ray, an invention he hoped would end all warfare. This happened very shortly before World War II began. If Tesla wouldn't have perished that night, would he have finished his renowned invention and achieved a time of peace? Would technology have advanced even further? The answer is unclear, and mysterious deaths like the case of Nikola Tesla have intrigued us for years, which is why we'll be talking about 3 similar cases on this week's video. The following name is a renowned one. She is one of, if not the most recognized aviator in the world. She has numerous accomplishments, including being the first female pilot to fly across the Atlantic Ocean single-handedly, and breaking the flying speed record at the time by an astonishing 28 miles per hour, translated in 45 kilometers per hour. As you might have guessed, we're talking about Amelia Earhart. However, on July 2nd, 1937, at the young age of 39, Earhart disappeared on her flight to traverse the globe. Although there isn't much information on the cause of her disappearance, what we do know are her radio transmissions. "We must be on you but cannot see you. Gas is running low. We have been unable to reach you by radio. We are flying at 1,000 feet. After an hour of radio silence, she made one last transmission. "We are on the line of 157-337. We will repeat this message. We will repeat this on 6210 kilocycles. Wait." The most popular belief is that they ran out of fuel and perished at sea. This theory is supported by the transmission, "We are on the line of 157-337. This refers to the compass headings to the nearby Howland Island, which is the target destination for the flight. This theory is further supported by, "We will repeat this on 6210 kilocycles, which indicates she is switching from her nighttime frequency to daytime, which is 6210 kcs. This is one of the numerous amount of theories, some others including Japanese capture and assuming a new identity. This disappearance is very significant, as Amelia was a pioneer for aviation. What we may take for granted today may not have been around if it wasn't for the talent and ingenuity of Amelia. She also paved the foundation for many women in the field. Due to her accomplishments, many female aviators felt more prideful and welcomed into the, at the time, predominantly male occupation. If what happened that day went differently, aviation as we know it today may be drastically distinct. This man was such a famous incident, it coined a popular phrase during the early 1900s, to pull a crater. It meant to vanish without a trace. After working rigorously on his dreams, he was appointed to be a New York State Supreme Court Justice by Governor Franklin D. Roosevelt, who, of course, after 3 years became the United States President. Joseph Force Crater. On the 3rd of August, 1930, Crater arrived to his residence in New York after promising to return to his wife back in Maine in a week. That evening, he went to a Broadway comedy, Dancing Partner. His companions claimed they last saw Crater crossing the street from the local restaurant, presumably to depart towards the play a couple of blocks away. Due to the fact he promised his wife to return to Maine shortly, there was no initial claims about him missing. Many days after he should have returned to Maine, his discerned wife called his associates and friends in New York to ask if they had any indication where her husband might have been. Once an investigation was launched, it ignited widespread publicity. As previously mentioned, to pull a crater was a popular colloquialism to go AWOL. There was little to no evidence on what happened to the missing justice, one of the only possible clues being that his safety deposit box had been entirely emptied. And why the box allegedly had been emptied? Well, Mr. Joseph Crater, appointed by Mr. Rosenfeld himself, was kind of cheeky. He had 3 mistresses, a couple of them had ties to the mob, and mind you, there was an all-out mafia war going on in the 1930s, and Mr. Crater was involved and had made enemies with the mob himself. The police also uncovered he was involved in graft, political payoffs, and fraud. On the 20th of February 1931, the 3rd mistress of Mr. Crater, Vivian Gordon, offered to testify about police graft when she met the head of an official inquiry into city corruption. This investigation was launched at the wake of Crater's disappearance. Gordon did so because she was about to lose custody over her then 16-year-old daughter. 5 days later, her life was taken, and after searching her apartment, the coat of Judge Crater was found. Counting 95 called witnesses and 975 pages filled with testimony, a grand jury started to examine the case, only to conclude that they could not determine whether Crater was alive or dead, whether he left voluntarily or he suffered amnesia or got killed. Crater's wife never showed up to trial, but 5 months later she found envelopes in a dresser containing money, the judge's will, and a 3-page long list with everyone who owed him money, ending with, "I am very weary. Love, Joe." As you can tell, the judge's disappearance is shrouded in mystery. He could have been killed, but it's also possible he just ran away, and people covered up for him. Some say all the mistresses knew what happened to him that night, but 2 of them ran away. One of these 2 actually was found in a mental hospital, and the 3rd one got killed in search for a deal to save the custody of her 16-year-old daughter, who eventually committed suicide because her mother was finally doing the right thing. Joseph Force Carter. His disappearance sparked numerous things. Besides the pain, the deaths, the trauma he left behind, the public was flooded with political scandals, police fraud, and public investigations. Even a mayor of one of the biggest cities in the world, New York, had to resign as a result of this investigation. So what would the world be like if Mr. Crater never disappeared? Would the world be different? Would political scandals still run deep without us knowing? Would the mob be more prevalent within US politics? Or did he stage his disappearance so perfectly that this is something he wanted to leave behind? This is something that the world needed to discover. If he was to operate as a judge until the end of his days, what kind of judge would he be? Would he crack down on corruption? Would he assist it? How would he advise President Roosevelt in World War II? Pilots such as Amelia Earhart are reputable for their achievements or their tenacity to persevere despite the odds. Our next pilot has seen it all, the lowest lows. He probably has been higher than any one of us. He has persevered through it all, yet he is lost. As you might have noticed, this particular story is one with slightly more ominous undertones. In the fall of 1987, an eerie series of events occurred 4,500 feet over the Bay Strait. These particular events would go on to riddle experts and investigators until this day. He persevered, he worked, and he was finally able to soar the skies. Unfortunately for him and us, we never know how high he went. But what we do know is that this case turned naysayers into believers of alien life. Frederick Valentich was a 20-year-old Australian pilot. He attempted to apply to enlist for the Royal Australian Air Force not once, but twice, and both times being labeled as inadequate for the conditions. He was personnel to the Air Force and was resolute to have a career in the occupation he loved the most. Despite the adversities, Frederick firmly stuck to his passion and kept learning. With a track record of 150 flying hours and a Class 4 instrument rating, he was authorized to fly at night. On Saturday, the 21st of October, 1987, events took place that would baffle the public and conspiracy theorists from that night onward. It was a training flight, a 125-mile flight over the Bay Strait Sea that was separating Tasmania and the Australian mainland. Or he was supposed to, because Frederick never made it across the open waters. Valentich had a transmission with Melbourne Air Traffic Control to report an unknown aircraft that was following him 4,500 feet in the skies. He was informed, however, that there was no aircraft traffic in that particular area. The aircraft Valentich claimed to see had 4 big green aluminum lights with a shiny metal surface. At this time, Valentich claimed that this aircraft was hovering above him. Soon thereafter, he reported his engines had failed. He was then asked a simple question to identify the aircraft. "It's hovering. It's not an aircraft." Followed by deafening metallic screeching. These were the last words of Valentich. And this is how the metallic sounds sound like. If we were to think rationally, it could be the wind when something broke inside the airplane. Remember, his engines failed, so he could be spiraling down. And while he was spiraling down, something could have broken off inside of the airplane, causing the wind to pass through the radio signal as he was trying to call for help. It's the same effect as when you try to make a recording when it's windy out, or in a car with the windows down. 5 years after his disappearance, an engine cowl flap washed ashore on Flinders Island. After some investigation, it was concluded that the flap could come from a Cessna 182 aircraft, and this particular part was identified within a certain range of serial numbers, which included Valentich's aircraft. That's not to say that we know what exactly happened to him. If you listen to the last part of the audio clip, something seems to be repeating itself 3 times. It sounds like a voice. It could be metal, it could be the wind, but it's not an identical loop. We at Rotated Reality actually think that this is a voice, crying out for help for the last time. With this hypothesis in mind, we were trying to figure out what he was saying, so we took this audio clip and ran it through some professional audio filters. For those who are familiar with audio processing, plugins. We used the BrainWorks Digital V2 to isolate the mono section. Then we used an EQ to cut out the other noise. From what was left of that signal, we used the BrainWorks Digital Equalizer again to emphasize what we think is the voice. Please don't pin this down as actual proof, but rather an observation. Our brain works in mysterious ways. If we see something that is strange, our brain will try to recognize patterns, just like in clouds or a moon man on Mars. Regardless, this is what we think are the last words of Frederick Valentich. It sounds like he's saying, "I'm going up, I'm going up, I'm going up," or "I'm pulling up, I'm pulling up, I'm pulling up." This could mean 2 things. He's either being beamed up by this aircraft or taken up somehow by this aircraft hovering over him, or he's crashing down so hard that he has to pull up. And in panic, he's screaming, "I'm pulling up, I'm pulling up." Take a listen again. It's almost ghost-like, but if you listen hard enough, you can hear him speak. We know it seems a bit far-fetched, but think of it as a cell phone which almost has no reach. You're speaking to a person and suddenly they become robotic and you just hear vague noises which you interpret as sentences or words. With that in mind, listen to this clip one more time and tell me what you hear. Is it, "I'm going up, I'm going up," or "I'm pulling up, I'm pulling up"? The only person who can clarify this is Frederick Valentich himself. Unfortunately, he's living amongst the stars, or died a horrible plane crash or something else. Maybe it's metal. Maybe the noise that you hear is the last moments before the plane crashed into the sea as he passed out. Who knows? But what if he was alive? Would he explain what he saw? Was it real? Was it a hallucination? Was it something he saw because he was inexperienced and not that good of a pilot? As explained by Nickel Joe in his 2013 The Valentich Disappearance, another UFO cold case solved. But this is rationale. Rationale sometimes doesn't explain it all. It seems rational because, yeah, it's rational. But maybe he's still alive. Maybe he's up there. Or maybe they probed him and he just died. But if he were still alive, it would be very interesting. And it could change the world and the way we look at our universe forever. So many questions, so many what ifs, so little truth. Do you know, or do you have any idea what happened in any of these cases? Drop a comment. If you like this video, please subscribe, hit the notification bell, and we'll see you at the next video. Thank you for watching.